What is this? Excuse me.
Silicon Valley is in chaos. Almost all of the major big tech companies are collapsing. For example, Meta was worth over $1 trillion in 2021, but just a year later, and their value has dropped by 2/3, and the other giants aren't far behind. Amazon, Meta, Twitter, Tesla, Netflix have all seen massive revenue drops, and the scale of these losses is unprecedented, especially considering big tech has been so unstoppable for the last decade. In fact, revenues and profits were skyrocketing.
Oh, this channel is Fallen Gun affiliated? Love that. That's fire. No fucking way. Are you serious? TikTok is worse than you thought? Stop watching TikTok's cringe videos because it's destroying society. Oh my God. How much do they make? Oh, dude, that's all like, it's all China shit, huh?
Rocketing. Silicon Valley was a billionaire factory, with some of the most prolific billionaires building their names and their bank accounts on the back of big tech companies. Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Jack Dorsey, all of them were created.
This is X's favorite channel. Bitch, what the fuck does XQC know about China? He probably watches this because it's like snappy editing and easily describing like complex ideas. This is how good propaganda is cut, okay? And then the 70,000 motherfuckers that watch XQC also are leaving with the same attitude. Like, oh yeah, it is probably like a Chinese conspiracy somehow.
By the massive tech boom of the last 4 decades. But then the bubble popped, and now the biggest names in Silicon Valley are seeing their revenue plummet, firing hundreds of thousands of employees, with the stock value of almost every big tech company falling dramatically. Which leads us to the question, how did it get this bad so quickly? Well, you see, tech was a growing part of the world's economy for years. Over the last decade, tech companies have only got larger and larger. Now, of course, there were ups and downs. For example, the dot-com crash of the late 90s proved the catastrophic consequences of overvaluing tech companies. However, over time, the industry always picked up again. It was a measured climb at first, but soon people forgot the mistakes of the past, and as the years rolled by and technology improved, the companies behind it grew richer and richer. But there were massive problems on the horizon for Silicon Valley, because the path wasn't all golden. For example, companies like Uber have coasted on their potential, hoovering up investments without a proper model for profitability. The same can be said for Twitter, and yet despite this, all of the giants of the industry grew to immense proportions on paper. For example, in 2018, Meta surpassed $500 billion in net worth, and Amazon were closing in on $1 trillion. But all of these companies had a similar problem. They just weren't worth what people thought they were. Their business models were shaky and in constant need of investment, or they just didn't make that much money to begin with. Their margins were always incredibly tight, and that's why almost all of these tech billionaires never look at the stock price.
That whole period is very interesting because the stock is not the company, and the company is not the stock. And so as I watched the stock fall from 113 to 6, I was also watching all of our internal business metrics. Every single thing about the business was getting better and fast.
Because they believed as their technology spread into every aspect of the world, the companies would always ride the
Moon is an insane xenophobic insult. Love it. That's extremely my shit.
wave of future potential. Their shaky business model just didn't appear to be an issue at this point. All these big tech companies were gaining more and more power, and
I just want to, guys, okay, listen, you're telling me all this stuff about Moon or whatever, but I just want to see like what he has to say about this, okay? I want to see what the fuck he's saying.
Seemed like they were untouchable, because big tech had something invaluable, the eyeballs and data of the entire world. You see, ever since they started pulling in user data at the massive levels they do now, social media companies were then further driven to maximize their engagement, keeping people on their app for as long as possible, and often as possible became the most important thing, which is why we're all so addicted to our phones and our laptops. It makes all of these big tech companies.
I make over $380K a year with less than 5 years of experience. I'm good at what I do. After talking with many of my friends, they don't want a union for tech workers because they know that their high salaries from RSUs and stocks will be too normalized. However, I do support unions. I just don't know if it'll be beneficial for people like me. Good luck. That's all I'm going to say. If you're such a fucking caked up bandit, you better be fucking gifting some subs.
Companies billions of dollars, allowing them to sell more and more ads and exploit more and more of your data. And over time, these companies perfected this process by manipulating psychology, making the apps so addictive that the entire world couldn't live without their smartphone. And during this process, they found out that anger and fear are some of the best ways to keep people engaged. And so as the algorithms were fine-tuned for engagement, they pushed more extreme and more provocative posts above everything else, putting them in front of everyone's faces constantly, all while censoring any information that didn't fit into Silicon Valley.
Oh dude, yeah. They're censoring information that doesn't fit the neat Silicon Valley vibes and attitudes, you know what I mean? That's why the largest content creators in the political sphere on Facebook, for example, which is what the fuck this guy's using as an example, are Ben Shapiro and Daily Wire and numerous other right-wing operations. That's also the reason why on YouTube, like, these guys are thriving. Yeah, they love censoring opinions that don't benefit
its political narrative, which is why Twitter, Meta, and all these other companies became the breeding ground for social media addiction, censorship, and hatred. And as time went on, the cycle ramped up and the culture war worsened. And these changes in the online space were reflected in the real world, leading to riots, unrest, and collapse. It didn't matter to the tech companies though. In fact, this was in their interest.
Dude, if you think that social media is leading to unrest and riots and not like human beings' material conditions, the volatility that they experience under a capitalist organization of the economy, and it's just like someone saw on Facebook that you should be rioting and that's why they're rioting now, I don't know what to tell you. That's crazy.
And instead of tackling the problems that they had caused themselves with their algorithms, companies started to then lean further on censorship.
Like, social media certainly leads to radicalization, right? I would say more effectively right-wing radicalization than left-wing radicalization. That's certainly what I believe. But that's also because the systems are right-wing. So it's easier and more effective when you're making propaganda that it's easier and more effective to make propaganda that is. So you think the January 6th insurrection was caused by a lack of good material conditions? First of all, just because an insurrection happened by like every fucking jet ski dealership does not change the reality that the volatility and all of the right-wing, all of the fucking right-wing agitprop that is completely outside of social media is not playing a significant role there. Big tech does not just encapsulate social media. I'm a software engineer. What? But yes, material conditions have allowed for the jet ski dealership owners to have a sense of entitlement that basically demands them to go to the fucking White House and go to the Capitol and break shit. So yes, material conditions still play a fundamental role in that. It doesn't just mean like poor people are rising up. It means that like upper middle class and like relatively wealthy people rise up too when they feel like they're not getting what they deserve.
Suppressing all counter opinions in the name of misinformation. But this solution wouldn't work forever. Tech companies were going to pay the cost for their meddling in public discourse. However, for now, they had to deal with a much more conventional problem: competition. Over the past decades, China has exploded into the technology industry. Companies like Tencent, Huawei, and ByteDance have been eating into the Western market share on a global scale. In fact, Tencent has made numerous takeovers of Western companies like Riot, Epic Games, and even Ubisoft. And through these moves, they've undermined Western dominance in the lucrative gaming industry, with China owning some of the most popular games today like Fortnite and League of Legends. And China's also taking over with things like TikTok and Tencent's investments.
Why is he posting China's W's to be like, this is the reason? It's just like, I mean, you can watch this as like a pro. You can watch this as like a pro China video. China is dominating the tech sector and they're dominating it so hard that like Westerners can't compete.
And Reddit and Discord. And then Huawei attacked hardware manufacturers, releasing cheaper alternatives loaded with Chinese data collection technology. Xiaomi did the same, but to even greater effect. Despite only being founded in 2010, they've gained over 12% of the market already.
It was so good that they literally had to ban it.
And ByteDance is probably the most sinister. I mean, China was well aware of the disruptive powers of social media long before the West had any idea, and they studied what the Western companies were doing with engagement and turned it into an art form, with TikTok exploding in popularity by playing on Silicon Valley's addictive business model. And by learning from Silicon Valley's successes and mistakes, TikTok has grown by 400% every single year, seizing Western social media companies' audiences from under their noses, which is why almost every major app has now adopted TikTok's short video model. And to put it plainly, this is a target.
Every social media does this. Every social media company does this. You just don't like it when China's doing it. That's it. I mean, it's just the truth. I don't like TikTok because it's... You don't like TikTok because you think it's like uniquely collecting data that like other social media companies aren't doing when they are definitely doing that. I don't like TikTok because it's brainwashing everyone in America in the most aggressive ways possible. It's brainwashing and changing people's like outlook, mindset, and overall nature of existence in a very, in my opinion, strategic way. I don't like TikTok because it's fucking stupid. It's like people watching on Skid Row as a hobby.
Targeted attack on Silicon Valley. All these companies have incredibly close relationships with the CCP, which has given them enormous room to scale up, because no matter how profitable these companies are, they've always got the Chinese government behind their back, and this gives them a massive advantage over the West. They don't have to deal with pesky human rights laws, ethical.
Bro, this dude is literally, how is he a libertarian? It seems like he's just saying like a centrally planned economy by a nation state that like sets clear-cut goals for their corporations is absolutely dominating the Western world in every field. What the fuck? He's just saying like China, he's just posting China W's. I think it seems like you watch this and if you have like an anti-China slant, you're like, oh yeah, this fucking sucks. I can't believe they're doing that. But if you watch this and you're like looking at this in an unbiased manner, you're like, wait a minute. I mean, this seems just like they're just like beating us in our own game.
Impediments or even profitability. Instead, they can be safe in the knowledge that as long as they pull the party line, they can get away with virtually anything. And this isn't just within China, this is everywhere. They get government backing abroad, as all of these Chinese big social media sites are practically a third party of the Chinese government. And as they work in tandem, these companies have become an unstoppable force. And so whilst the Western tech companies are always at each other's throats, China's tech giants have been allowed to build them.
Genghis went stronger imperialism. Libers, I want that. I mean, look, you can have an issue with many of the ways that this works. Ultimately, I care more about the material conditions that people are existing under, okay? If it's improving people's lives in a meaningful way, if it's building infrastructure, if it's making it so that like literacy rates are going up, if it's making it so that like healthcare is better, even though China is not very good at healthcare, let's be real, holy fuck. Possibly 33,000 people are dying every day is the speculation from Western media at the moment. 1 billion people have COVID in China currently, and the Lunar New Year is upon us. As a matter of fact, the Year of the Rabbit. I myself, of course, have Chinese relatives. I will be celebrating. But, you know, I don't believe that the 33,000 people are dying every day. But, like, you know. But COVID is a big issue in China. It is a big issue in China, for sure, at the moment. I don't know why I got into that. Oh, I was saying that the Chinese healthcare is not great. China's tech relies on tons of stolen research, though. Bro, are you fucking insane? Whose chat are you in? Do you think I would ever give a single solitary fuck about IP? Bro, I don't care. Why do you care? Are you Mr. Apple? Like, this is something I will never understand. Is your dad Mr. Hewlett Packard? Are you Mr. Packard, dude? What are you saying? This is such like a weird way that consent is manufactured amongst like Westerners, where they literally are just like, but China's stealing the IP. First of all, it's not like a surprise that China is stealing the IP. Every fucking capital owner knew that was going to happen and still made the decision to shift manufacturing to China. Okay? They've been know. They know. This is just propaganda for you to fucking get mad at for no reason. So why the fuck has manufacturing not shifted over to other countries? Why? They know IP's being stolen. Why the fuck are they, still making Apple iPhones in China? Also, why the fuck do you care about, why do you, I just don't understand. Why do you care about IP? Like, why do you care about IP? I will never understand. Do you think that, like, you're going to invent the new iPhone or something one day and you're scared that China is going to steal it? At that point, what, your value will go from, like, $10 billion to like 9.5? Is that what you're worried about? Would you care if someone in China was copying your merch? Dude, this guy is so good. This is so funny. He got me. Guys, he fucking owned me, dude. I love when guys come in here and think that they got me on this. No, I don't give a fuck, idiot. And they do it all the fucking time anyway. The only time I care is when they steal someone's fan art. Like somebody just steals someone's fan art and puts it on fucking, Redbubble or whatever. And it's like, the fuck are you doing? Don't steal fan art. I hate that shit. Wow, this is what you look like right now, Buster. You know it. Since we moved to a stock reward system instead of like a pension, it now matters a little more. Yeah, okay. I don't care. I don't care about this shit, okay? I don't.
Monopolies in peace, which is why every day China gains a little more ground on the West, because for every user and customer that China gains, Silicon Valley gets weaker, and this new threat has been awful for big tech's bottom lines, and the true consequences
I don't think this is the reason why they're laying off people.
have only just begun today. But before we continue, I want to tell you about the video. These problems were still on the horizon, but they hadn't affected the numbers yet. Apps like TikTok were only just getting started and massive growth was still expected. And by the end of 2016,
Which doesn't care about Albanian ad viewers, probably because we were invaded by the Ottomans for 500 years and we deserve as much. Well, technically, they don't really serve that many ads in Turkey either, so don't worry about it. Just another point of proof that Albanians are Turks.
2016, some journalists were hailing Silicon Valley as the future. They said this because something dramatic had changed. The list of the top companies used to always be dominated by oil and manufacturing, and a few financial giants that relied on their sheer scale to dominate. But these companies had now been replaced by Google, Amazon, Tesla, Apple, and Microsoft, pushing out the old guard. However, despite their immense valuations, these companies still weren't nearly as profitable as they should have been. From 1995 to 2015, Amazon only made $2 billion in profit, despite the company approaching $1 trillion net worth. Now yes, this move was meant to dodge taxes, yet it still portrayed a significant disconnect between Silicon Valley and the rest of the world. Rather than focusing on profitability, Silicon Valley companies were much more focused on growth, and the best example of this is Uber. You see, Uber spent years focused entirely on growth above anything else. They embodied the Silicon Valley mantra, breaking laws in industries to cement themselves in the market. With a massive leak showing that Uber executives were shown instructing their employees to use chaos and violence to uproot the taxi industry and put pressure on governments. And of course, they had big problems with actually making enough money. I mean, their business model still has incredibly low margins, even after they started to squeeze every penny they could and raising all of their prices, which has caused Uber to be in a worrying situation. With market saturation, their stock price is plummeting, and the company's dreams of market dominance are now fading into the ground. But Uber does still have a slight chance, as Silicon Valley overconfidence has led to way more destructive collapses, specifically in the case of WeWork. In early 2019, WeWork was seen as an innovative new company that was set to change the world of work.
I mean, he's just posting the L's of Silicon Valley, which, by the way, Uber, WeWork, every single one of these companies is just trying to deregulate a market and claim it's disruptive. And of course they were going to fucking fail. Like, that's it.
Work. Although it was founded in New York,
and then slapping on the tech banner. The only company that has been able to withstand that scrutiny has been Tesla, to its credit. Like, I'll admit. That's it. Tesla is the only company that has been able to slap fucking the tech logo onto it to greatly boost its valuation, and then simultaneously simetimes not fall apart or crumble. Thus far,
Silicon Valley mentality had definitely gotten to its founder, Adam Neumann. The charismatic CEO was so good at convincing investors that he pulled in billions. And only a few years after its founding, the company had raised over $1 billion.
And by the way, when I say thus far, I fucking mean it. Why? Why? You have to understand that 2023 is the year that Tesla is no longer the dominant force in electric vehicles. Every single major car manufacturer is now making fully electric vehicles. Some of them are going to be much better than the Tesla. It's not just the Porsche Taycan, okay? They're going to be more affordable than Teslas. It's not going to be a bitch and a half to fucking fix because they have dealerships and networks and all of that stuff, the infrastructure to take care of vehicles like that. It's going to be cheaper than Teslas. It's going to be more reliable than Teslas. The only thing that Tesla will be able to, the only thing that Tesla will have by the end of like 2025 is their supercharging capabilities. Okay. their supercharging capabilities, and if things were fair, that would have already become universal. If Elon truly was the world-saving global genius that he claims to be, that he wants to save the universe through electrifying our grid, through using electric vehicles, through all this shit, through focusing on renewable energy initiatives, what I'm mentioning would have already been the reality.
For their office space company. And I say office space company, but WeWork was still listed as a tech company. And so WeWork managed to raise over $1 billion for the company. And this was despite mass layoffs at the company and poor financial performance. Because simply enough, investors were just in love with the idea, rather than the product in front of them. In fact, WeWork lost over $2 billion in 2018, and yet the hype continued. Analysis stated that the company was now worth over $40 billion. This was more than...
But who knows if the superchargers even work, though? No, they do work. Look, come on, fair is fair. If there's one thing that Tesla has... if there's one area where Tesla is like very good at, it's fast charging, which is a gigantic component and or a gigantic hurdle rather of electric vehicles. Now, the inverse of that, of course, the other side of that story though is that superchargers may or may not kill your battery. So there is that too. Like even Porsche, I got an email from Porsche the other week saying we're only going to charge your car to 50% battery, because I think like a big part of the problem with electric vehicles right now is they're not as reliable over a long-term period. One, because battery technology is constantly improving, and two, because if you fucking charge your phone, like your Apple iPhone, for example, when it first came out, if you charged it full all the time, if you were trying to always have it at 100% without depleting the battery, you would kill your battery life over the course of a year or so. DC fast charging has a minor effect on longevity. There have been studies on the consumer level. It is not worth worrying about. Currently, you can't recycle EV batteries, which is one of the big problems for them. Yeah.
Giants like Airbnb, and by September, the company attempted to gain even more investor money, beginning the process of an IPO or initial public offering, and this would open the shares of the company to the public, raising even further billions for WeWork. And yet even with this enormous amount of investment, the IPO started to gain scrutiny as investors started to see that the company was really making no money, and it portrayed the true reality of the Silicon Valley business model: massive debt and low revenue propped up by other people's money. And so their $40 billion valuation was cut by...
Wait, are you serious about the Apple charging shit? I always have it charging. This guy, Chatter, just realized what not to do. It doesn't matter. Apple iOS already shuts it off, I'm pretty sure, to make sure that you at least get your 5 years worth of battery life expectancy. Can't recycle batteries? That's insane. Batteries are the most recyclable thing you can do. Crazy misinfo. There's no battery swapping in Western vehicles, Western EVs, as far as I understand. That was something that Elon Musk claimed he was going to do many, many years ago, and he never did it because I think it was too expensive.
3 quarters in a matter of days, resulting in 20% of the company being fired, and Newman, their CEO, and other executives were all forced to resign, and the company was forced to cut back on its massive growth plans. Reality hit the company hard, and today people are questioning the expiry date of WeWork. But yet again, Silicon Valley didn't learn from this example. Despite the very same business practices being used across tons of tech companies, this was just seen as an isolated case by tech elites. Besides, now wasn't the time to consolidate and slow down. And then as 2019 came and went, the world was forced into the pandemic.
First US case has been detected.
There's confirmation the coronavirus has reached Australia.
And it was here that tech companies would double down. COVID-19, as it was for so many other billionaires and corporations, was a massive opportunity for big tech. The pandemic saw tech companies' values rise by hundreds of billions. They made so much money, they barely even knew what to do with it. And it was the belief at the top of these companies that this is just how things were. Tech dominance into the future seemed all but guaranteed. Zuckerberg and others would be risky and short-sighted in their investments, assuming that revenue levels would stay strong after the pandemic. And that's why Meta's workforce grew by 28% in just a year, and Amazon massively expanded their own operations, seeing their profits soar by over 220%. Apple spent an extra
To be fair, at one point Elon said in an interview that his goal with Tesla was to disrupt the car market enough to force all of the car manufacturers to make electric cars, hence helping the environment. The problem is that Elon has become more greedy over time. First of all, Elon has been a charlatan since day one, and that statement in and of itself literally betrays Elon Musk's primary form of generating any kind of revenue for Tesla. He just said that, but that was just marketing, which you seemingly believed. If that was the case, then why the fuck was Elon straight up generating revenue through credit swaps, through green credit, through initiatives that the government had set up, through carbon credit swaps that the government had set up that functionally subsidized the operation for many years when they were literally at the verge of bankruptcy.
$90 billion just buying back their own stock during the pandemic, betting an amount worth more than the GDP of Sri Lanka on their continued success. You see, tech companies made massive investments into themselves, betting that the good times would never end, and it was this overconfidence that meant that when their profits finally did start to slow down, they wouldn't be able to cope with it. But overconfidence wasn't the only problem that worsened during the pandemic. You see, the culture war was getting more and more intense as people spent more time online. Unwinnable arguments raged as people's lives got measurably worse, and whilst the pandemic was lucrative for tech companies, they were some of the only winners, with lockdowns completely destroying the economy, putting millions out of jobs and businesses out of business. And it's impossible to measure the negative effects of the pandemic on people and their mental health. However, what was measurable was the heating up of the culture war, and eventually the result of this would be social media fatigue. People were just sick of the culture war, and China was now also closing in on Silicon Valley, as over the pandemic, TikTok grew by hundreds of millions of users, surpassing 1.1 billion in 2021. However, all of these combining factors hadn't affected big tech yet, but it would only be a matter of time. Meanwhile, the tech billionaires were enjoying their moments in the sun. Jeff Bezos spent millions on a personal space trip, whilst Elon Musk became Times Person of the Year for 2021. But all of this would turn out to be some of the last good news these tech billionaires had, as once the world finally opened up again, it signaled the end of Silicon Valley's boom, even if no one believed it. For example, at Meta, revenue growth had risen to over 50% in the summer of 2021, but
Did you just say fuck Bezos? Sorry, Hasan. Bitch, you think I give a fuck about Bezos? Get the fuck out of here. Yeah, fuck Bezos. What do you mean?
dropped sharply over the next 9
sucks.
months, falling to just 5%
He's like
by
a
the
literal
first quarter of
villain,
2022.
dude.
Amazon
Literal
also
villain
saw a
of
sharp
society.
decline, from over 40% to around 7% in the same time span. Even usually stable companies like Microsoft or Apple suffered the same fate, seeing their growth levels fall off. So what happened here? Well, all of the growing problems that Silicon Valley thought they could ignore.
He hates Bezos so hard he wants you to use your Prime subs. I mean, bitch, if you have it, use it. You know what I mean? No, you know what? You hate Bezos so much that you have an Amazon Prime but don't connect it to your Twitch account. You know what I mean? Like, the fuck are you proving at that point, idiot? There is no way to avoid someone like Jeffrey Bezos. You know what I mean? It's just he has his tentacles in everything.
Were finally making their mark, and whilst they had been shielded from the pandemic recession by artificial demand, that was all over now, and the economy was only getting worse, so people began to spend much less on products. People didn't care about ads. Essentials became more expensive, so people had less disposable income. Services saw a boost as well, as people made up for the lost time. And on top of this, the culture war had burned tons of people out as well, leading to less usage of social media. A Canadian survey found that less people were using Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter in 2022 than in 2020, and the only tech company that was spared from the decline was TikTok. Their growth was unimpeded, maybe because they're artificially propped up by the Chinese government. But it was clear for everyone in Silicon Valley that they were losing their audience's attention, and with this dramatic reduction in attention came dramatic cuts in their profits. And this is when the crack started to show. Tech companies had become so focused on growth that when it dried up, it hit them much harder than other industries. Over the course of 2022, tech companies lost more and more money, leading to their CEOs to make some erratic decisions. Musk took over as CEO of Twitter after years of negotiations and legal battles. He started off by firing large parts of the workforce, leading to massive technical glitches and problems with the app. Things were going so badly that he was forced to resign from the company. Google had put much of their focus on their new Stadia cloud console, but as with every other big tech company, 2022 also saw its demise, being forced to refund everyone who bought it without Google actually getting the products back. Additionally, Uber saw a sharp decline in their business, to ruthless competition, massive leaks, and higher prices. Meta stock value dropped by around 60%, with Tesla's dropping by 70%. So once 2022 was nearing nearing its end, tech companies realized it wasn't going to get any better anytime soon. They needed to cut costs, which is why you started to see articles of these big tech companies firing tens of thousands of workers, like with Microsoft firing over 1,000 employees, then Stripe, a growing startup, letting go of 14% of their workforce.
Why is nobody talking about TikTok's lack of creative rights enforcement as the core of its success? That's actually a really, really good take. TikTok literally flipped the fucking copyright concept in and of itself. Of course, a Chinese app would do that. Not surprising, but not only did the lack of copyright protections actually make the platform so popular, but it literally turned it around and people started paying influencers to play their music. TikTok has become one of the most successful ways of like churning out hits. It also literally cucked the music industry to TikTok, I guess, if that's what you mean.
Elon was forced to lay off nearly 4,000 people from Twitter, with Meta following shortly after, laying off a further 11,000 people. Amazon cut their numbers by 10,000, and all of this had happened in just over a month. Eventually, Amazon would double their numbers in December, as clearly they hadn't shrunk enough. And these weren't minimum wage employees either. They were both high-skilled and incredibly expensive employees. And in total, over 1,000 tech companies fired over 150,000 workers. But Silicon Valley had made their bed with their risky investments and growth-focused ethos. The same companies that had fought over these workers in the talent wars, which was just a year or two ago, were now letting them go and incurring massive costs in the process. And it wasn't just going to cost them at the time either. These firing sprees represent a massive amount of people with incredibly valuable skills. A job board called Tech Jobs for Good has seen massive increases in skilled job seekers off of the back of these layoffs. People who have seen the fast life of big tech companies are now instead looking to make a difference despite a small hit to their paychecks. And this is one of the ways in which the collapse of big tech will inadvertently benefit the world. But perhaps this is symptomatic of a much larger trend in our economy. As going into 2023, with the UN predicting we're going to be in a massive recession, it seems like Silicon Valley can only expect more and more suffering. The future looks grim. Ad buys are low, which has hurt all of the social media companies like Meta, and supply chain issues are now threatening hardware companies like Apple and Microsoft. Governments are also now souring on big tech, seeing their influence as destabilizing. Microsoft's $69 billion acquisition deal for Activision and Blizzard is being debated by monopoly watchdogs around the world. The FTC has already tried to block it. Meanwhile, the whole tech industry is waiting for another court verdict on recommendation algorithms. Google is being sued for recommending videos made by terrorists, which then incited an attack in France. And if they're found liable, this will upend years of legal doctrine stating that digital platforms aren't responsible for what people post. The result of the case will dictate what's allowed for years to come and will possibly cripple companies like Google and Meta. It is very clear to everyone in the tech world that 2023 is going to be the true test for these tech giants. And so far, only a week into the year, and Amazon is already shedding 18,000 more jobs, with more cuts expected in the next few months. It should be clear by now that it's going to be a very rough year for Silicon Valley, and only time will tell whether they're ever going to be the giants they once were.
It's an open secret at Amazon that they try to get you to quit. They increase your severance every year to get you to move out. This is for their non-warehouse jobs at least. No, it's the same for their warehouse jobs too. You know why though? You know, so if you stay in the workforce for a super long period of time, you are more likely to start trying unionization efforts. So that is precisely the reason why they want to make sure that there's constant turnover, right, of employees, except because of how much Amazon has grown and how it's literally everywhere, and because of like what it does, deliveries, right, logistics, it has to technically be everywhere. That has created a process where they are now running out of new people to hire. They're running out of people to hire in some areas because they've hired everyone at a certain fucking point. They've run out of people to exploit adequately. I was watching this with XQC, and all the juices were spamming Hasan's Paradise Aware. It was hilarious. I mean, dude, this is like a dub for China overall, so I don't know what they're talking about. It's weird because it like shows how capitalism is failing, and then it shows how like this supposedly communist country is like taking advantage of like the limitations of capitalism Okay, it's endless interest in like profit seeking and beating the capitalists at their own game by having like a state-sponsored enterprise, which like the fundamental difference in the way China operates and the way America operates is that the government is not subservient to corporations. The corporations are subservient to the government. That's the main difference, okay? In America, our institutions are basically taking money. Our government takes money from you in the form of taxes and then subsidizes corporations in a way that is still somewhat centrally planned, not in the same way that other organizations of the economy would work. But like, that's it. The main difference between China and America is that the Chinese government does not work for the corporations. The corporations work for the Chinese government. And as long as the Chinese government is like interested in marginally improving the overall living conditions of Chinese citizens, they're fine. That's what they're doing. Our farming is centrally planned, of course. But if you look at both of these processes and without even like taking into consideration capitalism or how this is supposed to work or whatever, if you look at both of these situations, like, doesn't it kind of make sense that, you know, it's better if there is a government that is supposed to be on working at the behest of like improving American prosperity, let's say. Like, if I were to describe to you Chinese terms by swapping out the word Chinese with American and swapping out the word communism with capitalism, 90% of the people in the show would be like, that's fire. I love that idea. I love that concept. Like, American prosperity is something that we should care about, right? Prosperity of Americans, the overall benefit of the entire citizenry, no matter how poor they are, no matter how rural they are. There's an issue in America with like rural hospitals. There's an issue in America with infrastructure. We are not spending enough money on our infrastructure. We're not fixing our infrastructure. That would greatly benefit the American economy, and it would genuinely improve the material conditions of every American citizen, right? Another effort with American prosperity could be in the form of a voluntary donation made to the state. Let's say you speak out against the state. You say, hey, this country fucking sucks. I hate this country. It's the worst country ever, you say, as a billionaire who has robbed the American people blind, okay? And then the American government could come to you and say, oh, yeah, that's really cool. Come on, let's take a quick trip real quick. And then you're disappeared for like 3 months. And then you come back whenever the American government decides that you're supposed to come back. And all the while in that process, they've asset stripped your company. They've made you fucking forcibly sell your mega yacht as an American billionaire. And if your company is like slated to go under, let's say your company has made some crazy real estate decisions. You're a real estate developer, okay? And your company is on the verge of bankruptcy. So much so that you, as an American businessman, go to your fucking American workers and say, hey, we are going to take money from your pockets right now to be able to at least pay off a piece of the debt that we have. Then the American government steps in and says, fuck no, you're not doing that, in order to show us, the American government, that you truly are genuinely interested in getting out of this debt, getting out of this rut, and fixing the problem that you have created. We are going to make you personally asset strip your own artwork to the tune of millions of dollars. We're going to make you sell your mega yacht, which is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, in order to pay at least some of the interest of this debt back. Okay? I feel like no one would say no to that, right? Every single thing that I just mentioned to you literally happened in China. Okay? Every single thing that I just mentioned to you, all the way down to the Chinese prosperity concept, which is something that continues to run the Chinese engine, the Chinese government. They are not great on a lot of issues, okay? They are certainly awful when it comes to, they're certainly not great, and I would say awful when it comes to, for example, monitoring the every individual citizen to the best of their ability. is hard to do regardless, but they still find a way to do it. They're awful when it comes to information, what kind of information that you are able to see. There's a lot that they do internally that I disagree with, but as far as I understand, most people are just like, if you're not watching fucking Falun Gong or whatever, or Falun Gong propaganda, most people that live inside of China, inside of Chinese borders, who do have legitimate concerns, but beyond like having normal legitimate concerns with your government, who doesn't have concerns with their government? Let's be real. We talk about all of our concerns with our government here in the United States of America every day. They understand that as long as you keep your head down, the government is looking out for you. Don't disrupt the process. The government is going to look out for you. And ultimately, they have delivered results. So it's an inarguable results. Impossible to argue against the results that they have delivered. In the sense, I mean, when you consider how much they have improved the material conditions of every single person that was in abject fucking poverty only a couple decades ago. American capitalists or Western capitalists love talking about how capitalism has brought so many people out of poverty, delivered fortunes to so many people, billions of people that used to live in abject poverty. Without China, that metric is awful. That metric literally shows that capitalism, with the exception of China, has only delivered more death and destruction to the rest of the world. They love shitting on China while simultaneously reaping the benefits of Chinese improvement. Bro, authoritarianism is never justifiable. That much is true. But what you consider to be authoritarian, or what level of authoritarianism is like going to always happen in any form of governance is where you and I have disagreements, probably, I would suspect. Now, I'm not saying that the Chinese level of authoritarianism is adequate or acceptable. I'm not saying that at all. But I do believe that if you look at it from like an anarchist perspective, all matter of states is going to have unjustifiable hierarchies. They're going to always reinforce unjustifiable hierarchies. They're going to do governance. Governance is authoritarian inherently. Okay? Depending on how fucking anarchist you are, showers could be considered an unjustifiable social construct that is being reinforced by capitalist society. They want you to be clean. They want you to be presentable. You know what I mean? Anyway, let's continue with Tucker Carlson. Fox's war on the woke mind virus.
This is a virus. It's infectious. It destroys your brain.
Almost every corner of our society is now sort of being infected with some of this wokeness.
When woke infects something, it spreads its tentacles.
We are seeing a woke ideology spread like a disease.
The wokeness is very potent.
Look, this is, I don't disagree with this. Where is it? Hold on. Before we move on, last thing about the China conversation. The economic system of state capitalism, if that's what you want to call it, has objectively been hugely successful system over the Western style imposed on the third world. Yes. That engine also runs with nationalistic fervor. That is the downside of such. That is the legitimate downside of it. Okay. Like, you have to be a little bit of a Han supremacist in order for this to like work out, because there needs to be some kind of like additional, I guess, spiritual glue that is idealistic and not inherently materialistic for it to work in the sense that in the way that it does. Something has to make people go, you know what? I feel like we're prospering together, and that's working. The fuck are you on about Han supremacy? It's not Han supremacy necessarily, but it's just like, okay, let's just say nationalistic supremacy. Like, we're all in it together. We're all working together. If you think that like the average Chinese person is considering like uplifting the working class globally, you're out of your mind. It's not they're That's not the goal. If that was the case, then they would not be already shifting their resources over to other developing nations in an effort to ensure that they still have a decent profit margin for their manufacturing that they've set up so far. It's just, that's how it is. Ultimately, though, if you are looking at it, I do agree that the state is not an infallible institution, and there aren't any like adequate safeguards. Okay, there aren't super adequate safeguards against like a government that could decide to be like super corrupt and not actually take care of its citizens. And then the only safeguard in that regard, and this is something that Slavoj Žižek talks about, is if you are there's two different methods of control. You have the neoliberal method of control, and then you have the more authoritarian method of control, right? But in the authoritarian structure, in the authoritarian information dissemination, you always understand that the state is basically controlling you. You get it. You recognize it. In the neoliberal structure, you don't understand the state is controlling you. You don't understand that capitalist interests are controlling your lives, and you have this level of freedom, or this level of perceived freedom, if you will. Okay? So the downside of the authoritarian, if you want to consider it that, the authoritarian level of control comes with people understanding that there is always that arm of the state that's holding you down. So when the state fucks up and the state decides not to genuinely improve your lives, and then you lose confidence in the state, like many Americans have lost confidence in the American state under the neoliberal methods of control, okay, you rise up and you rebel and you burn shit down. In the neoliberal method of control, when you lose confidence in the state taking care of you, you don't do anything with that anger. There is no mechanism because you don't even know that you're being controlled to begin with. That's the difference. Now, I'm not saying one is better than the other. I don't think. But if your concept is that like no such control should ever exist, well, there has never been an institution. There's never been a form of cohabitation, no form of organizing, no form of governance that has destroyed that form of control. It's going to happen whether you recognize it or you don't. Historical teleology shows a trend towards more centralized systems being able to solve an even more complex problems. Just like capitalism came out of the failure of feudalism to deal with more complex crises, state capitalism is slightly more able to deal with modern complex crises. Yes. And if you want to be super, super, super charitable, then the state does not get destroyed overnight, but it ceases to exist when there is no need for it, I guess, which is why communism is supposed to be a stateless, classless, moneyless society. The end goal, if you will, I guess, that you finally get to after a transitional state of socialism. Communism is not stateless. I mean, it's borderless, so what the fuck are you talking about? What is a state without borders, money, anything? The way that you understand states would not exist under communism. If it's borderless, if it's moneyless, and if it's classless, then it's technically stateless. You can have the concept of a state if you want to have like a different flavor around it, but ultimately it would not exist.